At 65 years old, I did something that made everyone think I'd lost my mind. I signed away my house, my business, my savings, everything I'd spent 42 years building with my husband. My lawyer grabbed my hand across the table. "Margaret, stop. You're signing away your entire future." I smiled and signed anyway. Richard's lawyer tried to hide her grin. His mistress was probably already picking out furniture for MY House. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd already won this game 3 weeks earlier. I'm Margaret Chin, and this is the story of how I destroyed my cheating husband's life by giving him exactly what he wanted. Before I continue, I need something from you. Hit that subscribe button right now. Why? Because what I'm about to teach you about fighting back, about keeping records, about patience as a weapon, this could save your life someday. And drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. It was a Tuesday in March when I found the credit card statement. Not hidden, just there, on Richard's desk in his home office. He'd gotten careless after 42 years of marriage. Complacent. Grand Lakeside Hotel and Spa, $847 Tiffany & Company, $2, $300 The Cosmopolitan Restaurant, $456. I'd never been to any of these places. My hands didn't shake. That's what surprised me most. I photographed every page with my phone, put the statement back exactly where I'd found it, and went downstairs to make dinner. Salmon, his favorite. "How was your day?" I asked him that evening, smiling across our dining room table, the one we'd bought at an estate sale in 1983. "Exhausting," he said, not looking up from his phone. "The Morrison account is demanding. Might need to take another trip to Hartford next week." Hartford, where the Grand Lakeside Hotel was located. "That's fine, dear," I said. "I'll be here." I'd always be here. Predictable. Loyal. Boring Margaret. That was his first mistake. Thinking I was boring. You know what's interesting about being underestimated your whole life? You learn to weaponize it. For 42 years, Richard had joked about my obsessive filing system. Every receipt. Every bank statement. Every document from our entire marriage, organized by year, then by month, then by category. Margaret could find a grocery receipt from 1987 if you asked her. He'd laugh at parties. He stopped laughing when I found the apartment lease. It took me 2 weeks of careful searching. I knew he wouldn't be stupid enough to leave evidence at home, so I went to his office after hours. I still had keys, the ones from when I used to work there, before he convinced me to retire 10 years ago. The lease was in the filing cabinet marked Vendor Contracts. Apartment 4B, Riverside Towers, Hartford, Lessee. Our Morgan business address, monthly rent, $3, 200 lease term, 3 years. 3 years. He'd been paying for another woman's apartment for 3 years while I clipped coupons and wore the same winter coat for a decade because we need to save for retirement. I photographed everything. The lease. The payment records showing the rent came from our business account. The utilities. All paid by Morgan & Associates Consulting, the business we built together. Then I found the love letters. You want to know what's worse than discovering your husband is cheating? Reading his love letters and realizing he's more romantic with her in 3 years than he was with you in 42. "Scarlett, you make me feel young again. With you, I'm not just Richard the businessman. I'm alive. Scarlett." Even her name was dramatic. I was Margaret. Practical. Reliable. Boring. I took photos of every letter, put them back exactly as I'd found them, locked up the office, and drove home. At a red light, I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. 65 years old. Gray hair. I'd stopped coloring because Richard said it made me look distinguished. Wrinkles earned from raising his children, building his business, and supporting his dreams. When had I stopped having dreams of my own? The light turned green. That was the moment I decided to burn his entire world down. I didn't confront him immediately. That's what amateurs do. Instead, I spent 3 more weeks gathering evidence. Bank statements showing $180,000 diverted from our business to consulting expenses that were actually gifts for Scarlett. Hotel receipts. Restaurant bills. A BMW lease, in her name, paid from our account. I compiled everything into a folder. Organized. Thorough. Undeniable. Then, on a Sunday evening in April, I cooked his favorite meal again. Salmon, roasted potatoes, asparagus, and tiramisu for dessert. I waited until he'd finished eating. "Richard," I said calmly, "I know about Scarlett. You could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Deny? Confess? Apologize? Deflect? He chose anger. How long have you been spying on me? Not I'm sorry. Not I can explain. Just an immediate accusation, making me the villain. 3 weeks, I said. But you've been cheating for 3 years. His jaw tightened. Margaret, you don't understand. I understand you spent $180,000 of our business money on your mistress. I understand you leased her a BMW. I understand you've been paying for her apartment for 3 years. Silence. Then, I want a divorce. Just like that. Cold. Final. 42 years of marriage. 2 children. A grandchild. A business we built from nothing. Dismissed with 4 words. Fine, I said. I'll call a lawyer tomorrow. He looked almost relieved. We can split things fairly. The house, the business, the accounts. My lawyer will draw up papers. That's when I saw his game. He'd wanted me to find out. He'd been sloppy on purpose. Because now he could be the one asking for divorce. Now he controlled the narrative. That sounds reasonable, I lied. He actually smiled. I'm glad you're being mature about this, Margaret. Some women would make this ugly. I would never do that, I said sweetly. After all, we're both adults. His second mistake, believing me. Richard's lawyer was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive suit, shark smile, and zero conscience. David Brennan of Brennan and Associates. He'd apparently been preparing for this divorce for 6 months. Long before I found the credit card statement. Richard hadn't gotten careless. He'd been setting the stage. The preliminary settlement arrived by courier 3 days later. Proposed divorce settlement. To Margaret Chin Morgan. $75,000 cash settlement. Your personal vehicle, 2015 Honda Accord. Personal effects and clothing. Half of the joint checking account, current balance, $8,400. To Richard Morgan. Primary residence, valued at $890,000. Morgan and Associates Consulting, valued at $2.1 million. All business accounts. Investment portfolio, $340,000. 2023 Mercedes S-Class. I sat in my lawyer's office, reading this document while he watched my reaction. James Whitmore was 58, competent, and genuinely concerned for me. He'd been recommended by my daughter. Margaret, he said gently, this is highway robbery. How much should I get? I asked. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state. Given the length of the marriage and your contributions, you should receive roughly half of all marital assets. That's approximately $1.8 million. $1.8 million versus $75,000. What are my chances if we fight? I asked. James hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. The problem is documentation. Richard restructured the business 10 years ago when you retired. He removed you from all official paperwork. The house is solely in his name, he refinanced. In 2019, and somehow convinced you to sign a quitclaim deed. I remembered. He'd said it was for tax purposes. I'd trusted him. So I have no claim to the business I helped build for 32 years? We can fight it, James said. But it'll take years in court. Legal fees could run $150,000 or more. And there's no guarantee we'd win. I looked down at the settlement offer again. $75,000. After 42 years. What if I just sign? James's head snapped up. What? What if I accept his offer? Sign everything over. Walk away. Margaret, please don't make decisions based on fear or exhaustion. You're entitled to so much more. I know, I interrupted. But what if I just gave him everything he wants? James studied me with concern. You'd be destitute. At 65, starting over with only $75,000? That's unconscionable. Schedule the signing, I said. I want to settle this quickly. Margaret. James, trust me. Schedule it for next week. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Perfect. That night, I went to my storage unit. The one Richard didn't know about. I'd rented it 15 years ago when we decluttered the house. Richard had wanted to throw out all my old files. We'll never need tax returns from the 1980s, Margaret. But I'd secretly moved everything to storage instead. 23 boxes of documents. Organized by year. I pulled out box 7, 1981 to 1985. Inside were documents from when Richard and I first started the business. Original business registration from 1981. Morgan and Associates, established by Richard Morgan and Margaret Chin Morgan, equal partners. Partnership agreement signed by both of us. Articles of incorporation listing me as 50% owner. Business loan applications from 1982 to 1984, showing both our names. Tax returns from those early years reporting the business as a partnership. But the real treasure was Box 12, 1996 to 2000. Hidden inside was a folder labeled personal. Inside were copies of emails I'd secretly saved from Richard's computer back in 1998 when I'd gotten suspicious during his last affair. Yes, this wasn't his first. In those emails, Richard had written to his accountant, "I want to restructure the business to minimize Margaret's ownership stake. If we divorce in the future, I need to ensure she can't claim half. What are my options?" The accountant's response: "We can gradually transfer ownership through a series of shell companies and restructuring. It'll take years, but we can effectively remove her from the business while keeping everything legal. She'll need to sign some documents. Tell her it's for tax purposes." Richard had been planning to cheat me out of the business for 25 years. Long before Scarlett. Maybe even during his last affair. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was calculated as long-term theft. I didn't call James right away. Instead, I called my nephew Trevor. He was a private investigator, something Richard had always joked about at family gatherings. Trevor and his little spy business, he'd laugh. Trevor wasn't laughing when I hired him. "Aunt Margaret, are you sure about this? These investigations can get uncomfortable." "I'm sure." 2 weeks later, Trevor handed me a folder 3 inches thick. Scarlett Reynolds wasn't Richard's first affair during our marriage. She was his third. Affair number 1, 1998 to 2000, with his secretary Jennifer. Cost: approximately $85,000 in gifts and vacations. Affair number 2, 2008 to 2010, with a client named Patricia. Cost: approximately $110,000, including a business trip to Paris that I'd never been invited on. Affair number 3, 2021 present with Scarlett. Cost so far: $180,000 plus. Total embezzlement from our business: approximately $375,000. But wait, there was more. Trevor had also discovered that Richard had opened secret credit cards in the business name, created a separate LLC I knew nothing about, transferred business assets to this secret LLC, been systematically undervaluing Morgan and Associates for years in preparation for divorce. The real value of the business wasn't $2.1 million. It was closer to $3.8 million. And I had proof of all of it. I met with James again, but this time I brought 3 bankers' boxes with me. "Margaret, what is all this?" he asked. "My insurance policy," I said. "Don't open them yet. First, I need you to do exactly as I say." "I don't understand." "James, you're going to schedule the settlement signing for this Friday. You're going to tell Richard's lawyer that I'm accepting all terms. You're going to act defeated and disappointed." "Why would I?" "Because," I interrupted, "on Thursday night, you're going to file an emergency motion with family court. But Richard can't know about it until after I sign his settlement on Friday." James looked baffled. "That makes no sense. If you sign the settlement, the emergency motion becomes." "Trust me," I said. Then I opened the first box. It took James 3 hours to go through everything. When he finished, he looked up at me with something like awe. "Margaret, how did you?" 42 years of marriage, I said simply. I kept records of everything. And I mean everything. This email chain about restructuring the business. This is fraud. This is a conspiracy to commit fraud. I know. And these bank records show the secret LLC. He's been hiding assets. That's illegal. I know. If we present this to a judge. We will, I said. But not before I sign his settlement. James stared at me. You want to sign away your rights before we reveal evidence of fraud? Exactly. Why? Because, James, I'm not just going to win this divorce. I'm going to destroy him. And to do that, I need him to believe he's already won. Friday morning. Conference room at Brennan and Associates. I dressed carefully. A simple blue dress, minimal makeup, no jewelry. I wanted to look defeated. Diminished. Richard was already there when I arrived, sitting beside David Brennan with the confidence of a man who'd won. He'd even brought Scarlett. She waited in the lobby, a not-so-subtle display of his new life. He looked good, tan from a recent vacation that I'd paid for through embezzled business funds. New suit. That smug smile. Margaret, he said with false warmth. Thank you for being reasonable about this. I didn't respond. Just sat down next to James, who played his role perfectly, shifting papers nervously, looking uncomfortable. David Brennan slid the settlement across the table. I think you'll find everything in order. Once signed, this agreement becomes binding. Mrs. Morgan, do you understand that by signing, you're relinquishing all claims to? She understands, James said quickly. Can we just get this over with? The document was 47 pages long. Page 1. I relinquished claim to the marital home. Page 12. I relinquished claim to Morgan and Associates. Page 23. I relinquished claim to investment accounts. Page 31. I relinquished claim to Richard's pension. Page 40. I acknowledged receiving fair and equitable settlement of $75,000. Each page needed my initials. Each page was another piece of my life signed away. I picked up the pen. Margaret, James said, his voice carrying genuine distress. He was good. I'm begging you one last time. Don't do this. At least let me try to negotiate. It's fine, James. It's not fine. You're giving away millions. James. I looked at him firmly. I've made my decision. Richard was barely containing his grin. I initialed page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Mrs. Morgan, David Brennan said, I want to state for the record that you've been advised by counsel and understand. I understand perfectly, I said. Page 15. Page 20. Page 25. I saw Scarlett peek through the conference room window, her face bright with excitement. She'd probably already planned how to redecorate my house. Page 35. Page 40. Page 45. Last page, David announced, sliding it toward me. I read it one final time. I, Margaret Chin Morgan, hereby acknowledge that this settlement is fair, voluntary, and made with full understanding of my rights. I relinquish all future claims to marital property and waive any right to appeal this agreement. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. James put his hand over mine. Margaret, please. I looked up at Richard. He couldn't hide his triumph anymore. This was the moment he'd been planning for 25 years. I smiled at him and signed my name. Well, David Brennan said, gathering the papers. That's done. Margaret, you'll receive your settlement check within 10 business days. Richard, congratulations on resolving this amicably. They shook hands. Richard actually stood up and extended his hand to me. Thank you for being mature about this, Margaret. I hope we can remain civil for the children's sake. I stood slowly, gathering my purse. Oh, Richard, I said sweetly. We'll definitely be seeing each other again. Probably at family events, he agreed, misunderstanding. Something like that. I walked out of the conference room past Scarlett, who didn't even try to hide her smile, and into the elevator. James followed me. As soon as the doors closed, he turned to me. Margaret, I don't understand what you're. File the emergency motion, I said. Right now. He pulled out his phone. Judge Martina Vasquez's chambers, emergency family court motion, filed 11:47 a.m., April 14th. The motion included request to void the settlement signed 23 minutes earlier based on fraud and duress. Petition for an emergency asset freeze on all Richard Morgan's accounts. Motion for forensic accounting of Morgan and Associates. Evidence of 3 separate affairs and embezzlement. Evidence of conspiracy to defraud spouse of marital assets. Request for sanctions and punitive damages. And attached to the motion, all 23 boxes of evidence. We stepped out of the elevator. How long before Richard finds out? I asked. James checked his phone. David Brennan will receive notification in about 30 minutes. Process server will deliver Richard's copy within 2 hours. Good, I said. I want him to have time to celebrate first. I was at home, well, technically still am home for another few hours, when my phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Margaret. His voice was pure ice. What the fuck did you do? I'm sorry, could you be more specific? You filed you can't, we signed an agreement. We did, I agreed cheerfully. I signed it at 11:44 this morning. Then at 11:47, my lawyer filed a motion to void it based on fraud. Turns out you can't trick someone into signing an agreement by hiding assets and lying about business values. You bitch. Oh, Richard. Is that any way to talk to your wife of 42 years? The woman you just finished thanking for being mature? I could hear him breathing hard. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice no longer sweet. A judge is going to review my evidence. All of it. The original partnership agreement. The emails from 1998, where you plotted to steal the business. The records of 3 separate affairs. The $375,000 you embezzled. You can't prove. I can prove everything. I have every receipt, Richard. Every bank statement. Every email. Every document from 42 years of marriage. You used to mock me for that, remember? Margaret and her filing system. You're not mocking me now. Silence. Oh, and Richard? That settlement you just celebrated? The one where you thought you'd keep $3.5 million while I got $75,000? I'm going to take everything. The house. The business. The investments. All of it. You can't. And then, I continued, I'm going to make sure the IRS gets copies of everything. Because you know what else I found? Evidence of tax fraud going back 15 years. Underreported income. False deductions. That secret LLC you thought I didn't know about? The IRS is very interested in that. More silence. Margaret, he said finally, his voice shaking. Please. We can work this out. We can negotiate. Negotiate. I laughed. You just spent an hour watching me sign away my entire life. You brought your mistress to wait in the lobby like some kind of victory lap. You offered me $75,000 after 42 years. And now you want to negotiate. I'll increase the settlement. $500,000. $750,000. Please, Margaret. See you in court, Richard. I hung up. My hands were shaking. But this time it wasn't from fear. It was from pure, crystalline triumph. Judge Martina Vasquez was 62, sharp-eyed, and had a reputation for absolutely despising liars. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, just 3 days after I'd signed Richard's settlement. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. No jury. Just the judge, the lawyers, me, Richard, and a court reporter. Richard looked like he hadn't slept. Good. David Brennan stood immediately. Your Honor, this emergency motion is frivolous. Mrs. Morgan voluntarily signed a settlement agreement just 72 hours ago. She was represented by counsel, she reviewed all documents, and she acknowledged. I've read your response, Mr. Brennan, Judge Vasquez interrupted. I've also spent the weekend reviewing Mrs. Morgan's evidence. All 23 boxes of it. She turned to Richard. Mr. Morgan, did you or did you not send an email to your accountant in 1998 discussing how to restructure your business to minimize your wife's ownership stake in preparation for a potential future divorce? Richard glanced at David, who nodded subtly. I may have discussed asset protection strategies, but that's standard business. It's a conspiracy to commit fraud, Judge Vasquez said flatly. Did you or did you not create a shell LLC called Riverside Consulting Services and transfer business assets worth approximately $1.2 million into that company without your wife's knowledge? Your Honor, that LLC was for legitimate business purposes. Did you or did you not spend approximately $375,000 of marital business funds on 3 separate extramarital affairs over 20 years? Silence. Answer the question, Mr. Morgan. The business valuation was done by a professional you paid, who used metrics you specifically requested, that would minimize the company's apparent value. I've reviewed his analysis. Judge Vasquez looked down at her notes. Did you or did you not deliberately undervalue Morgan and Associates at $2.1 million when forensic analysis suggests a true value of $3.8 million? More silence. Your Honor, David tried again. Mrs. Morgan signed that agreement willingly. After 42 years of systematic financial abuse and manipulation, the judge snapped. Mr. Morgan spent decades preparing to rob his wife. She spent decades documenting his crimes. I know which side I believe in. She turned to James. Mr. Whitmore, what is your client seeking? James stood. Full forensic accounting of all marital assets, including the Shell LLC. Fair division of all marital property, including Morgan and Associates. Reimbursement for funds embezzled during the marriage. Punitive damages for fraud. And full payment of my client's legal fees. Granted, 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 and granted, Judge Vasquez said. Additionally, I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all of Mr. Morgan's accounts pending full asset disclosure. Trial is set for. She checked her calendar, June 15th. That gives you 8 weeks to prepare. Richard's face had gone gray. One more thing, the judge added. Mr. Morgan, I'm ordering you to vacate the marital home immediately. Mrs. Morgan will reside there pending resolution of this case. Your Honor, that's my house. It's marital property, she corrected. And given your demonstrated willingness to hide and dissipate assets, I don't trust you not to damage or strip it. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings. Mrs. Morgan gets the house. I walked out of that courthouse and back into my home. The home I'd lived in for 38 years. The home Richard thought he'd stolen. That night, I slept in my own bed in my own house for the first time in weeks. It felt like justice. The next 8 weeks were brutal. Richard's lawyers fought everything. They challenged every document, questioned every number, filed motion after motion, trying to delay or dismiss. But James was relentless. The forensic accountant's report came back first. Dr. Patricia Kim, CPA, CFF, had spent 3 weeks analyzing every transaction from Morgan & Associates going back 15 years. Her findings: true business value, $3.8 million. Richard had claimed $2.1 million. Hidden LLC assets, $1.2 million. Richard had claimed it didn't exist. Embezzled funds, $375,000. Richard had claimed business expenses. Underreported income, $280,000. Richard had forgotten some client payments. Total marital assets, $5.9 million. Not the $3.2 million Richard had disclosed in his settlement. $5.9 million. My fair settlement of $75,000 was 1.2% of the actual marital assets. But the accountant found something even better. Mrs. Morgan, Dr. Kim said during our prep session, your husband was very clever about hiding money. But he made one critical mistake. What's that? He kept perfect records of his theft. Richard was so paranoid about the IRS that he'd meticulously documented every transaction, including the fraudulent ones. He'd just hidden those records in his secret LLC, which we now had full access to. Every gift to Scarlett, documented. Every hotel stay with his mistresses, documented. Every falsified business expense, documented. He built his own coffin and carefully labeled every nail. Richard's deposition took 6 hours. I wasn't allowed in the room, but James recorded it legally and let me watch later. Watching Richard squirm under questioning was better than I'd imagined. James: Mr. Morgan, you testified that you built Morgan & Associates entirely by yourself. Is that correct? Richard: Yes. I founded the company in 1981. James: Yet this partnership agreement from 1981 lists both you and Margaret Chin Morgan as equal founding partners. Can you explain that? Richard: That was symbolic. Margaret wasn't really involved in. James: I'm showing you Exhibit 47. Tax returns from 1982 through 1989 showing business income reported jointly under both your Social Security numbers. Was that also symbolic? Richard: We filed jointly because we were married. James: I'm showing you Exhibit 63, a loan application from 1985 where you described Margaret as your equal partner and co-owner of the business. Was that a lie? Richard: No, but... James: So she was a co-owner? Richard: It's complicated. James: It's actually very simple, Mr. Morgan. Either you lied to the bank in 1985, or you're lying to this court now. Which is it? It went on like that for hours. Then came the affairs. James: Mr. Morgan, do you know a woman named Scarlett Reynolds? Richard: Yes. James: What is your relationship with Ms. Reynolds? Richard: We're friends. James: Friends who share an apartment you pay $3,200 per month for? Richard: Aye, that's a business property. James: A business property where Ms. Reynolds lives full-time? What business is conducted there? Richard: It's complicated. James: I'm showing you Exhibit 91. Text messages between you and Ms. Reynolds. Can you read the highlighted portion? Richard: Long pause. I'd rather not. James: I'll read it then. I can't wait to hold you again. Margaret suspects nothing. We can be together soon, my love. Does that sound like a business relationship, Mr. Morgan? By hour 5, Richard's lawyer was objecting to everything, and Richard looked like he might cry. But the best part, the very best part, was when James played his final card. James: Mr. Morgan, I'm showing you an email you sent to your accountant in 1998. Can you read the subject line? Richard: Pale. I don't recall this email. James: The subject line reads, Protecting assets from potential divorce. Do you recall it now? Silence. James: In this email you wrote, and I quote, I need to ensure that if Margaret and I divorce in the future, she cannot claim half the business. What are my legal options to minimize her stake? Did you write that? Richard. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right. James. This is a civil deposition, Mr. Morgan. You can't invoke the Fifth. Did you or did you not spend 25 years systematically planning to defraud your wife? Richard. Silence. James. No further questions. Scarlett Reynolds was 34, beautiful, and absolutely terrified. She arrived in designer clothes that Richard had bought her, and immediately started crying when James began questioning her. James. Ms. Reynolds, how did you meet Richard Morgan? Scarlett. He was a client at my previous job. We started talking. James. When did your relationship become romantic? Scarlett. About 3 years ago. James. Did you know he was married? Scarlett. Yes, but he said the marriage was over. He said they were separated. James. I'm showing you Exhibit 112. A family photo posted to Margaret Morgan's Facebook page 2 years ago showing her and Richard at their grandson's birthday party. Does that look like a separated couple? Scarlett. Crying harder. He said that was just for show. James. Ms. Reynolds, did you know that Richard was paying for your apartment with money embezzled from his business? Scarlett. No. I didn't ask where the money came from. James. Did you know he bought you a BMW with marital funds? Scarlett. He said it was a gift. James. Did you know he spent approximately $180,000 on you over 3 years while his wife wore the same winter coat for a decade? Scarlett. Sobbing. I didn't know. I'm not a bad person. By the end, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She was a victim, too, of Richard's lies and manipulation. But she'd also helped destroy my marriage, so my sympathy had limits. June 15th, Family Court. Judge Martina Vasquez presiding. The courtroom was packed. My children sat behind me. Richard's brother attended, surprisingly on MY's side. Even some former employees from Morgan and Associates came to support me. Richard sat alone except for David Brennan. Scarlett hadn't shown up. The trial took 3 days, but the outcome was never really in doubt. James presented our evidence methodically. Day 1. Proof of my co-ownership and contributions to the business. Day 2. Evidence of Richard's embezzlement and affairs. Day 3. Forensic accounting showing hidden assets and fraud. David Brennan tried to fight back, but what could he say? We had documents. We had emails. We had Richard's own words condemning him. On the 3rd day, Judge Vasquez delivered her verdict. I've presided over family law cases for 18 years, she began. I've seen terrible behavior, cruelty, selfishness, betrayal, but rarely have I seen such calculated long-term financial abuse as what Mr. Morgan perpetrated against his wife. Richard stared at the table. Mr. Morgan didn't just cheat on his wife. He didn't just steal marital funds. He spent 25 years systematically planning to rob her of everything she'd helped build. He manipulated business structures. He hid assets. He lied to his wife, his accountant, and this court. She looked directly at Richard. Sir, you disgust me. Here is my ruling. First, Morgan and Associates is marital property. Mrs. Morgan is entitled to 50% ownership and 50% of its value. Based on the forensic accounting, that value is $3.8 million. Mrs. Morgan's share is $1.9 million. Second, Mr. Morgan will reimburse the marital estate for the $375,000 he embezzled over 20 years. That money will go entirely to Mrs. Morgan. Third, the marital home, valued at $890,000, is awarded entirely to Mrs. Morgan as compensation for Mr. Morgan's fraud and waste of marital assets. Fourth, all investment accounts and retirement funds will be divided equally. Fifth, Mr. Morgan will pay Mrs. Morgan's legal fees in their entirety, $180,000. Sixth, punitive damages. Given the egregious nature of Mr. Morgan's conduct, I'm awarding an additional $500,000 in punitive damages to Mrs. Morgan. Let me calculate the total. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the judge's pen. Mrs. Morgan, you will receive $1.9 million business share, $375,000 reimbursement for embezzlement, $890,000 home value, $170,000 half of investments, $180,000 legal fees, $500,000 punitive damages. Total, $4,015,000. For $1 million. Richard's face had gone from gray to white to a strange greenish color. But Your Honor, David Brennan stood desperately. That's more than half of the marital assets. That's nearly 70%. It's justice, Mr. Brennan. Your client tried to leave Mrs. Morgan with $75,000 after 42 years. Instead, she's leaving with $4 million. Mathematics has a beautiful symmetry sometimes. She banged her gavel once. Additionally, I'm forwarding copies of all financial evidence to the IRS and the Connecticut Attorney General's office for potential criminal investigation. This case is closed. I sat frozen for a moment, unable to process what had just happened. For $1 million. James grabbed my hand. Margaret, we won. We won. My children rushed forward, hugging me, crying. I looked across the courtroom at Richard. He sat motionless, staring at nothing. Everything he'd worked for. Everything he'd schemed for. Everything he'd destroyed our marriage for. Gone. And he had only himself to blame. I ran into Richard one last time, 3 weeks later. I was at the bank, depositing the check from the sale of his half of the business. His former partners had bought him out at a loss. They didn't want to work with him anymore. He was there to close his accounts, probably moving whatever little money he had left somewhere the IRS couldn't easily track. We made eye contact across the lobby. For a moment, I thought he might ignore me. Instead, he walked over. Margaret, he said quietly. Richard. He looked old. Really old. The tan was gone. The expensive suit had been replaced with something off the rack. His hands shook slightly. I just wanted to say. He swallowed hard. You destroyed me. I looked at him for a long moment. No, Richard. You destroyed yourself. I just documented it. I gave you 42 years. You stole 42 years, I corrected. You stole my work, my contributions, my trust. You tried to steal my future. The only difference between us is that when I took something from you, a judge agreed I deserved it. He had nothing to say to that. Where's Scarlett? I asked, unable to resist. His face hardened. She left. Apparently, she was only interested when I had money. Shocking, I said dryly. He turned to leave, then stopped. Was it worth it? Destroying me? Does it make you happy? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. Was I happy that Richard was broke? That his reputation was ruined? That his business partners had forced him out? That he'd likely face criminal charges? No, I said honestly. Your suffering doesn't make me happy. But my freedom does. My security does. My house, my money, my future that I earned and you tried to steal. That makes me happy. I picked up my receipt from the teller. Goodbye, Richard. I walked out of that bank and into the sunlight. And I never looked back. I'm writing this from my home office, the home I fought for and won. I'm 66 years old now. Single. Financially secure. And genuinely happy for the first time in decades. Here's what happened after the verdict. The house, I kept it. Redecorated. Made it mine. Every room now reflects my taste, not Richard's. The money, invested conservatively. I'm generating enough passive income to live comfortably without touching the principal. My children, closer than ever. They supported me through everything, and now we have dinner together every Sunday. Richard, last I heard, he's living in a one-bedroom apartment in Hartford, working as a consultant for $45,000 a year. The IRS investigation resulted in $280,000 in back taxes and penalties. He'll be paying that off for the rest of his life. Scarlett. She married someone else 6 months after leaving Richard. Someone with money. I hope she's happy, but I doubt it. Me. I volunteer at a women's legal aid clinic 3 days a week. I help women going through divorces navigate the system. I teach them about documentation, about knowing their worth, about fighting back. I've helped 17 women so far. 3 of them have told me I saved their lives. If you're watching this and you're in a situation like I was, here's what I want you to know. 1. Document everything. Every receipt, every statement, every text message. You think you'll never need it. You're wrong. 2. Don't trust reassurances. When someone tells you something is for tax purposes or just a formality, verify it yourself. 3. Know your worth. I spent 42 years being told I was just a helper. I believed it. Don't make my mistake. 4. Never sign anything when you're emotional. When Richard first served me with papers, I almost signed just to make the pain stop. Thank God I didn't. 5. Get the right lawyer. Not just any lawyer, the right lawyer. Someone who believes in you and will fight. 6. Patience is a weapon. I waited weeks to make my move. I let Richard think he'd won. That patience gave me the advantage. 7. They're counting on you being too tired to fight. That's their strategy. Wear you down. Exhaust you. Make you give up. Don't. 8. Your dignity is not negotiable. No amount of money is worth accepting lies about your contributions or your worth. You know what's funny? Richard thought he was so clever. 25 years of planning. Shell companies. Hidden assets. Restructuring. Affair after affair. But he made one critical error. He underestimated me. He thought I was boring, predictable, stupid Margaret, who would just accept whatever he offered. He forgot that boring, predictable Margaret was also meticulous, patient, and extremely good with documentation. If you're watching this and you're the Richard in your relationship, the one hiding assets, planning to cheat your spouse, thinking you're smarter than everyone else, let me give you some advice. Stop. The Margaret in your life is smarter than you think. She's documenting more than you realize. And when she finally moves against you, you won't see it coming until it's far too late. And if you're watching this and you're the Margaret, the one being underestimated, undervalued, and taken for granted, let me tell you something. You're stronger than you know. You're smarter than they think. And you absolutely can win. But you have to be willing to fight. At 65 years old, I gave my husband everything in our divorce. My lawyer begged me to stop. His lawyer couldn't believe her luck. But what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 days earlier, I'd already planted the bomb that would destroy him. I didn't lose that divorce. I won it before it even began. Thank you for watching my story. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And most importantly, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. Tokyo, London, Rio, Cairo. Let me know. Also, tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Would you have signed those papers? Would you have fought from the beginning? Or would you have done exactly what I did? I read every comment. Your stories matter to me. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Never too late to fight back. Never too late to win. I was 65 when my life fell apart. I'm 66 now, and I've never been happier. If I can do it, so can you. This is Margaret Chin Morgan reminding you. Document everything. Know your worth. And never, ever underestimate the power of a woman who's done being underestimated. See you in the next video.